I launched Acuiti in 2019, really taking the view that business-to-business publishing hadn't really evolved despite the evolution and despite the advent of the internet. So what we do at Acuiti is we provide a channel through which senior executives can share information with each other anonymously online and privately at our in-person events. So we built networks. We've got about 3,500 people in our collective network, but we have individual networks for different company types across the global market. And each quarter, members of the network can suggest questions that they want to ask their peers, and then we survey the network along those lines. So we launched it, as I mentioned, in 2019. Obviously, COVID was quite an interesting challenge for a new business, but we survived that. And now, fortunately, I think we can say the road ahead hopefully is clear. And so we're building and growing quite aggressively now, which is, after 4 years, it's been a long road, but it's good to be firmly on it now. I think there's a number of headwinds and tailwinds in the European market today. I think globally, the derivatives industry is in a very good position. You have rising interest rates, which obviously benefits the FCMs in terms of the money they can make from interest on client funds. But you also have the volatility in the underlying rates market, and that obviously is extrapolated across the global market. So Europe, I think, has the benefits of the tailwinds in the global market, but it also has some unique challenges. The disruption caused by Brexit obviously continues to reverberate across the market. And then in some areas, I think we're picking up significant signals that the regulation is a little bit too heavy-handed in some areas, which is causing problems. And liquidity, I think, is weaker in Europe in a lot of instruments than it is in other markets. That's something we pick up in our research. And part of that is the nature of the market. There's not as much retail flow in Europe as there is, say, in the US, as a result of various structural factors in the market. But also I think regulation is in some areas dragging back firms from investing and decreasing liquidity. There's probably two core areas we've touched on recently. One is the impact of Brexit and the potential for the UK to develop its own rules, its own a framework for financial regulations. On the one hand, the Brexiteers will argue this is a great opportunity to exercise our sovereignty and to develop a deregulated framework which gets away with some of the more onerous elements of MiFID II, such as sell-side reporting. But at the same breath, I think a challenge is that a lot of firms, especially the larger banks, don't want divergence from EU laws because of the risk of losing equivalence. So obviously there's an ongoing debate around equivalence. So while Brexit poses an opportunity in theory, in practice it's much more difficult to realise some of the potential benefits. Also, what you see is European regulators becoming a little bit more protective, as you expect, possibly from Brexit and the risk of divergence. So initiatives such as the move to create active clearing accounts in EU CCPs for euro-denominated and zloty-denominated products, I think is probably unnecessary. I think to mandate it. The other element of the EU proposals to make it easier for EU CCPs to innovate, I think is generally supported by the market, but a mandate of where to clear swaps is unwelcome, we find, amongst the FCMs, who obviously do the majority of the clearing. The other area we see of European regulation that we are deeply concerned about is with regards to proprietary trading firms and the IFR capital rules, which were designed to be a lighter touch version of the capital rules that banks face, but because of the way they're written, they're having a majorly disproportional impact on certain proprietary trading firms who are facing, in some instances, over 100 million euros or more of capital charges, which is completely disproportionate to the risk that they pose the market, and both in terms of market risk and liquidity risk. And I think it's going to impact liquidity unless it's changed in the review, which I understand is coming up in a couple of years. We recently put out a report, a survey. It was our quarterly proprietary trading survey, which is a survey of over 100 senior executives in the global proprietary trading market. We found that a significant percentage, I think it was around a quarter of firms in the EU, were considering giving up their MiFID II licenses to avoid IFR, but also other regulations that have been imposed on them as a result of their MiFID II license. That was very surprising, just the scale of that, and also over half of firms were looking to relocate certain operations outside the EU to reduce the balance sheet exposure in the EU under IFR. That we were pretty taken aback by the scale of that. If even only half of that happens, it would have a massive impact on European liquidity. So again, I think that should be a signal to regulators both in the UK and Brussels that IFR needs to be looked at again and quickly.